Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving deep into the hidden power dynamics of our digital infrastructure. And honestly, it goes so much deeper than you might think. The sources we're exploring outline a fascinating, yet kind of invisible dynamic. We're looking at how elite tech philosophies leverage these massive data systems and AI to create what we can call a captive digital parade. It's essentially a system engineered from the ground up to keep its architects completely hidden while simultaneously hyper-tracking the everyday masses.
All right, let's take a quick look at the roadmap for today. We'll start with the captive digital parade, move into asymmetric stratification, explore Thiel's mimetic machine, break down interface inversion, and finally look at reclaiming agentic sovereignty.
Section 1. The Captive Digital Parade. We're going to start by looking at how historical subjugation serves as a pretty stunning mirror for our current digital landscape. Historian Mary Beard describes the visceral Roman triumph, where an unseen, or highly elevated, elite paraded captive kings around as a hyper-visible display of total subjugation. Just think about that visual for a second. You have the general riding high, orchestrating the whole spectacle, while the captive is marked, shackled, and paraded around for everyone to see. It's the ultimate, visceral display of dominance through visibility. And this brilliantly illustrates our modern sociological reality. Whenever you interact with a closed platform, you are essentially walking in this modern digital parade, hypervisible, constantly tracked, and monetized, while the architects of those very platforms remain completely unseen. In our digital age, the shackles aren't made of iron, right? They're algorithmic tracking tags. The general's chariot is the proprietary server farm, and the captive king represents everyday users who are just paraded through endless data marketplaces. Section 2. Asymmetric stratification. Now let's examine the actual sociological mechanisms that actively enforce this digital divide. Sociologist Satish Deshpande defines this structural closure as asymmetric stratification. Imagine the fluid river of social mobility literally freezing over into a rigid grid. It's essentially this process where a supposedly open, achievement-based class system hardens into an inescapable caste. It locks people into their born status, all while the system pretends everything is still completely fair and merit-based. So in practice, the elite hides safely behind what is called the unmarked general category shield. They claim pure merit, which effectively launders their inherited advantages into casteless merit. This creates a dynamic where the top cruises along as an invisible dynasty, totally shielded from scrutiny, while the bottom is trapped in a suffocating, automated miasma of surveillance just to receive the most basic resources. The sources actually argue that this exact dynamic is the blueprint for modern tech cabals. Section 3. Thiel's mimetic machine. So how exactly do corporate tech philosophies leverage and weaponize this calcified social structure? According to Stephen Dial's objective analysis of the source material, Peter Thiel's worldview relies heavily on this concept of mimetic desire, which was pioneered by philosopher René Girard. This theory basically posits that humanity is driven by a chaotic urge to imitate what others want. We don't naturally desire things, we desire what we see others desiring, and that inevitably creates a vicious, endless cycle of envy and rivalry. Dial argues that Thiel capitalizes on this theory by investing in social platforms that systematically industrialize and, of course, monetize our envy. By creating environments optimized for mimetic contagion, these platforms effectively manufacture desire. It is literally the modern captive digital parade. Users are locked in a cycle of constant comparison, while the platforms themselves sit above the fray, extracting immense advertising revenue. Furthermore, it's super fascinating to note that Thiel named his data firm Palantir after Tolkien's Seeing Stones. Now, in the mythology, these tools provide massive surveillance power, but they risk serving corrupting forces by selectively distorting reality for an insulated elite. The sources suggest this reflects a much broader architectural philosophy, creating an environment where an insulated elite utilizes powerful surveillance tools to actively enforce asymmetric stratification, tracking the masses while remaining safely out of sight themselves. Section 4. Interface inversion. Let's descend even further down the stack and see how this tech enclosure is rigidly enforced down at the actual hardware level. The texts define interface inversion as that exact moment a centralized cloud dictates the terms of computation to you. You might feel like you're in control because the app interface is smooth, but that's a total illusion. The opaque machine intercepts your intent and meters out what you're allowed to do. The underlying execution is monopolized, stripping away local control and reducing sovereign pilots into captive digital tenants renting space from an invisible agentic king. The sources draw some really fascinating historical parallels to map this power grab chronologically.
Just as the 1648 Treaty of Westphalia or the 1689 Orange Pledge fought back against centralizing absolute monarchs, researchers warn we are hurtling toward a 2026 cloud enclosure. This represents a massive new centralization of digital authority that we will have to relentlessly fight against to maintain our sovereignty.
And guys, the sheer scale of this problem is absolutely staggering. An estimated 80 to 90% of modern AI compute cycles rely on what the sources call the FPU gambler. FPU stands for floating point unit. Deep down inside the silicon, the machine fundamentally prioritizes speed over exact accuracy. It isn't doing precise calculations, it is essentially just guessing the math. And because the machine is fundamentally just throwing darts at a board to approximate reality, it triggers a devastating wood chipper effect. It chops up the shared creativity of millions of humans, permanently destroying exact data provenance. This traps us in that foggy, automated miasma we talked about earlier, perfectly serving an invisible elite that thrives on harvesting our obscured data. Section 5. Reclaiming agentic sovereignty. Finally, how do we solve this problem, break out of this digital enclosure, and actually take back the wheel? The solution, according to the sources, is surprisingly elegant. We must look to cryptographer Nick Szabo's vending machine primitive. Think about a literal physical vending machine. You put $1 in, you press a button, and a soda comes out. There's no human intermediary, no cloud algorithm deciding if you deserve it today. It just executes. We need this exact same strict, deterministic execution in our software to replace these messy, opaque cloud abstractions. To safely cage rogue AI in the system and prevent catastrophic permission explosions, the sources outline these 4 strict, non-negotiable architectural steps based on decades of OS security. We start with a default deny, where agents have 0 permissions. Move to task-scoped grants for highly specific access. Utilize underlying OS layer enforcement, and dynamically apply automatic scope reduction. Now, the crucial point in securing our data is using local LIFO ledgers. LIFO stands for last in, first out. These state trees act exactly like a strict bouncer at an exclusive club. They only check the very front of the line, what programmers call index 0, for absolute immediate mathematical truth. This completely prevents conflicting overwrites without needing to scan thousands of past records. So all of this together mathematically proves your record of sweat. By escaping those approximations of the FPU gambler and shifting to the strictly deterministic ALU, or arithmetic logic unit, you anchor your digital intent firmly back onto the physical hardware that you physically control. It proves actual metabolic human energy was spent, completely unbottlenecking your local agency. As the Great Cloud Enclosure attempts to wall off your digital reality and force you onto their servers, the ultimate question is this: will you passively accept your spot in the captive digital parade, renting your capabilities from an invisible tech monarch? Or will you secure your hardware, claim the record of your sweat, and become the sovereign pilot of your own machine? The tools are here, and the choice is entirely yours. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and I'll catch you next time.